All right, boys and girls, it's time for part 6 in our Road King police bike build. Now, if you've been paying attention this whole time and following along, you know we've done a whole bunch of work to this bike, and for this phase in the project, we've only got a little bit more to go until we get this bike back on the ground and ready to see what it's gonna look like. So obviously where we left off last time was we had gotten the primary back together, got the pipe on the other side, which had a few little things that we needed to button up before we got to the next step, which is now. So there were a couple of things that I left off on this side that since then I've taken care of, just figured I'd point those out to you. I got our derby cover back on. The reason I left this off was because the ARP 12-point fasteners that came with the kit don't work with this old stock derby cover. I was trying to see if there was something temporary I could find to use as a derby cover on there. I've got something customized that we've got on the way. I was just trying to see if I had something in the meantime I could use, but I didn't, so I just put the old derby cover back on with the original screws, and we'll save the ARP hardware for when the new derby cover comes. The other thing I was waiting to get on was I had some parts out at powder coating, and one of those things was the bracket that holds the footrest and the kickstand in place. So we reused the original one, just had it powder coated black. And then this kickstand is not original. This is an extended, I believe it's 1 inch longer kickstand. We got from Drag. I'll leave a part number for that. We got them on our website, just in case you're looking for one of those. So a bunch of kickstand parts, new little bumper. And then finally, put our shifter back on, and obviously the heel shifter is gone from here. Just put a spacer in. We also sell these, the heel shifter eliminator spacer. Actually, I'll pick up the camera and show you what I'm talking about because these are nicer than what Harley sells, and I'll show you why. All right, so here's the spacer, which is the heel shifter eliminator. And so what this does is it puts your toe shifter out here at the end of the shaft and lines it up really nicely with the footboard. If you buy the eliminator kit from Harley, it leaves the toe shifter all the way in here and just puts a cap on the end of this. I think this looks a lot nicer and functions a lot better too. So I'll leave a link to that in the description. And then this piece here is what I was talking about that we powder coated in black, just so you know everything would kind of match. You can't really see it, but just figured it was a nice touch while we had some other stuff out at powder coating. All right, so with all that stuff taken care of, we're ready to make a big visual progress here, although not a ton of work. We've got our fenders back from paint, some other parts back from powder coat. So it's time to get our front and rear fenders on, show you what this bike is gonna look like. We'll get our bags back on, basically get this bike almost fully assembled. The only thing I still haven't done, and I know I said I was going to and I haven't yet, is I have not figured out the wiring mess up here yet. So what I'd like to do is get the battery back in, get the tank on, and then once I can start putting power back to the bike, it'll be easier to start tracing out these harnesses and test things. So that's my plan, battery, tank, fenders, all that stuff's gonna go on. Then I will start to figure out all that wiring, and then we can finally get the nacelle and the headlight back on, and this bike will be ready for the road. So I will show you these parts as they start to go on, and we'll make some progress. So here we go. All right, with the tank back on, got the switch pods plugged in, battery in, fuse in. I know I should be continuing on to get the fenders on right now, but I just can't help myself. I gotta do a test start on this and see what it sounds like. So obviously we haven't tuned in or anything. I just got the pipe on here, just gave it another wipe down just to be sure there's no fingerprints on it, but I gotta hear it, and I figured might as well turn the camera on and let you all enjoy. There we go. God, I love those HPI pipes. All right, now that I got that little moment of joy out of my way, we can go back to working on this wiring and getting the other fenders on, so stick around. All right, with that out of the way, it's time to move on to getting our fenders on. I'm gonna start with the front, so we got the bike jack back up here, and the keen observers among you will notice that I got the headlight nacelle and light bar and all this stuff back on. Now, could I have shown some of that on video? Yeah, probably, but honestly, it was really just a mess of wiring that it might have been helpful to show some people, but man, it's tedious stuff, and trying to do that on a video, pinning wires back and figuring out what goes to what, I just didn't think it was gonna be worthwhile to film. So in any event, got those wires cleaned up and got our lights all plugged back in, made some little modifications up there along the way. But in any event, let me grab the front fender and let's get it put on. All right, so what I've got here is a stock fender off of a Road Glide ST, and we had it painted and pinstriped to match our factory cream and white paint job. So you can see there's a double gray pinstripe here. I just think this is a just cool, subtle, kind of, I don't know, low-key kind of paint job that just the kind of thing I really like. So I'm excited to get these on and see how it looks, but definitely, you know, maybe not quite as small as some of the real short kind of cafe fenders you can do now, but a lot smaller than what was there, and I just kind of like the idea of reusing a newer OE part, kind of like we did on the wheels. So let's get this on and see how it looks. All right, nice and straight, and I just want to take a step back and kind of take a look at it. Yeah, I think that's really cool. I like the size a lot. I think it's perfect. So obviously this clutch cable's got to get tucked out of the way. Once I do the final adjustment on it, I like to confirm it with the bike running just to make sure we've got this dialed in perfectly. So we'll do that once it's on the ground. A couple other little details to knock out here, but I think let's go get that rear fender on, because that's what I've really been waiting for. Well, obviously the big question since the very beginning of this series and the very first video is which fender did we wind up going with? And we got a lot of comments on that video, and I really appreciate all the input people had, and it was pretty mixed of what people thought in terms of what was gonna look better or worse, or you know, what combination might work. Well, ultimately what I decided was a longer fender might have been the cleaner and more factory look, but what I really wanted was something that looked distinctive and a little bit more aggressive from the back of the bike. So shorty fender is where we went. So this is the FXR division sport fender. I think it came out super cool with the black and white two-tone. If you'll remember, the original fender was not two-tone, it was just black. So this is obviously a little different. We incorporated that cream white with the double pinstripe. So whole bike's gonna be really well tied together. So I'm excited to get this on, see what it looks like. Quick note, I guess, before I put it on. Obviously I've got the mounting hardware put on here already. And we've got the wiring harness put in here. What this is a Dyna rear fender harness. So it's a little bit longer than it needs to be, which is no big deal. We'll find a way to tidy that up, but it's got all the wires we need. It's got the same plug that goes into the bike side, and it's gonna hook up to the integrated taillight perfectly in the back. So put that on before we got the fender on. I'll deal with the license plate bracket and the taillight itself once the fender's on the bike. So here we go. All right, well, there's our first look. I think it's dope. This thing is obviously sitting really high, maybe higher than it needs to be totally honest with you, but I'm digging how it's looking. So I'm just gonna get these snugged down nice and evenly, and we'll come back and start to get the rest of the accessories put on here. All right, with the fender tightened down, first thing I'm gonna do is get the license plate bracket put on. So I've got a rubber grommet here, and we've got our hardware, and I'm just gonna pop this through. And then this fender is a little different than an OE fender. It does not have the provision built into it for the screw that holds the taillight base plate in place. So FXR division includes this little bracket that mounts under the same nuts that hold on the license plate and gives you that tab. So I've got hardware here, and I'm just gonna go ahead and get all this stuff started. These are nylock nuts, which is nice, but I am gonna have to use a wrench to tighten this all the way down. I just wanna get all of them started so this thing is not gonna fall off while I'm working on it. Cool. So now I'm gonna grab a couple of wrenches, get this nice and straight, and we'll get it snugged down. Okay. Easy as that, license plate brackets on. Obviously, when the time comes, we can just pull this trim off and stick the plate on, but we're not gonna do that for right now. This is all looking really nice, and we are good to go. All right, so next thing I'm gonna deal with is, well, I was gonna get to this taillight, but I'm staring at this seat screw hole here. So before I forget about that, I've got our seat screw, which is from Saddleman, and the washer that we had on before, along with the special nut that clips into the fender. Now, this may just slide right through, and it may not. I might have to take a little paint off. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But they're usually a pretty loose fit on the raw fender, so my guess is it'll go through. Not quite. So I'm gonna just lightly file the inside of this hole. I'm gonna try not to go through the primer, just get through that top layer of clear and paint, and we should hopefully be able to slide this right through. All right, there we go. Got our nut in. Next thing I'm gonna do is get our taillight base plate on. So this is normally a pretty straightforward process. What you'd have here is this tab is part of the fender. There'd be a little, I don't even know what you call it, it's like a spring nut on there, kind of thing that just slides over. Kind of same thing as holds the dash trim on some bikes, but anyway, you'll slide this on and then there'll be a screw that goes through here. So I have got to go find a nut and a screw, and we'll get this mounted up. But our wiring harness is right here, and this will just plug right in here, and then we'll get our tail light hooked up and we'll be good to go. So let me find some hardware for this, and we'll keep rolling. All right, I realized I wasn't thinking, and I do, of course, have the appropriate hardware for this because I've got the original fender that came off the bike. So there is the captive nut that's going to slide on here. And there is the screw that's gonna attach the taillight base plate. So first thing I'm gonna do is put this guy on. And now just get our base plate here. Slide the harness through. And get that started. Screwdriver. There we go. All right, once again, just make sure we've got our alignment nice and straight, which looks like we're good. And we'll get this tightened down. All right. So obviously one little step here is gonna be to just plug this in. I'm gonna throw some dielectric grease on here as well as on the other connections. So let me grab a taillight, screws, some grease. We'll get this all buttoned up. Okay. So here's our taillight. As I mentioned, integrated with turn signals built in. We are gonna hopefully be running some additional turn signals on the tour pack. I have not really gotten to the bottom of that yet to figure out how I'm gonna wire up the lights that are in there, but that's my plan, but that's gonna be for another day. All right. So get our tail light plugged in. All right. And then I can never remember which is left and which is right, the purple and the brown. Obviously you could just look at the instructions that come with the sheet, but I am gonna just do what I normally do and just guess. And if it's right, we leave it. And if it's wrong, we just gotta switch the plug. So I got one turn signal plugged in, and so turn the bike on. All right. No tail light, which is interesting. Oh, probably would help if I plugged the harness in. Let's see what we got. Hey, there we go. All right, so I think this is, I got the left side plugged in on the bike, and we've got left turn signal here on the light. So, guessed correctly. Plug the other turn signal in. And these taillights come with like a little sort of jumper here that you can then plug additional turn signals in, like if you had factory turn signals and you were just adding these on. So for my purposes here, I'm just gonna tuck them out of the way. Sometimes, like, you know, if space is an issue or I'm doing some other stuff, sometimes I'll cut these off. But in this case, we don't have to cut them off, and who knows, maybe we'll wanna throw some real turn signals on here down the road. And if we did want to do that, we've got the option. All right, I think that's probably as good as we're gonna get there. All right, so there's our tail light in place. Pretty much on the 1 yard line here. So let me get tidied up and we'll start getting our additional parts back on here. We've got the top plate that mounts the tour pack to go on. We've got our saddlebag brackets to go on, seat, a couple other little details. So we're almost there. All right, so the next thing to go on in our order of operations here is the bracket for the tour pack, or I don't know what you'd call it in the case of a police bike. Maybe it's still called a tour pack, the box. This is the one that came off the bike. As you can see, obviously this has a license plate mount built into it. This is not bolted on, this is part of the bracket. This is also where the air regulator for the air ride seat lives. So Couple of things. Number one, I didn't want this to be chrome anymore. I wanted it to be black. I also don't want either of these two pieces on here because we don't need them. However, I wasn't willing to just start hacking this apart and throwing things away on the off chance we want to restore the bike back to the way it was, or I want to run the police seat, or, you know, who knows. So what I did was just went on eBay and found another one. Got it in, made sure it was the same thing in the right size, had it powder coated black, and before I did that, I cut the license plate bracket off of it. So now it's ready to go. I just have to bolt the top plate onto it that came off of this one, and we'll get it put on the bike. All right, so that's sort of on in place there. Now, I am having a little bit of trouble remembering the order of how all these things went on. We've got our side covers here, or our strut covers. I got these powder coated as well. And I'm just trying to remember which bolts go where. Okay, so this bolt is gonna go on the outside, so we'll tighten these two down, then the cover goes on. Cover goes on. We'll put the last bolt in here, and then there's one more bolt to go in here once the cover is on. Obviously, we've got our saddlebag support brackets on too. Just gotta make sure I get those in the right order as well. I'm pretty sure saddlebag brackets go on after these, but I'll double check that, and we'll keep rolling. All right, let's get these saddlebags put on. So we're ready to go. I've got my brackets, and we're gonna get them mounted up. Now, you may remember these brackets that I mocked up in the very first video. These are the same brackets. If you'll notice though, there's a slight difference, which is that they no longer have the mount for your mufflers or the mount for the lower fender connection. I don't have either of those things, and I thought it would just be a little bit cleaner because you can see these brackets, given the fender and everything that I've got. Thought it'd be a little bit cleaner to just grind those welds off and spray some paint on here. It's not 100% perfect, but if this is all gonna work out the way I hope it does, can always get these powder coated to get them matching the frame and looking perfect down the road. So that said, basically what we gotta do here is get these put on, and actually, just get this side cover out of the way for a minute. So we've got our two mounting points for the bracket here and here. Hopefully I'm not blocking the camera. And then our saddlebag mounts are gonna be here and here. So I will get this hardware started, and we will very shortly have our bag on. Now, the other side I've actually been working on for the last couple of hours because I've got something a little bit different going on over there, which I will show you now that I've got it all done. And I guess I can kind of give you a little hint of what it's gonna be. Obviously this is a police bike, and one of the things that I was attempting to get functional again were like the audio warning controls. So the Siren and all that stuff, just because I thought it'd be kind of funny to have that working. So with that, wanting to do that, there's a big amplifier that used to mount on the saddlebag bracket that came up like this, sort of in front of the bag. I decided I didn't want those big guards on there, so I moved the amp inside the bag. Had to extend the harness, add another connector into it so the saddlebag would still be removable. I'll show it all to you, but it works, and I think it's pretty cool. And what's, I think, the best part about it is you can't see it. It's pretty well hidden, other than some, you know, nuts you can see on the outside of the saddlebag. So I think that's pretty sweet. Okay, so that's our bracket on. I've got one little more modification to make. Again, if you remember way back in the beginning of this series, I talked about how those little bayonet style saddlebag mounts are really no good, and you can definitely lose a saddlebag because of them. So we do have the solution for that that's gonna go on now. So I'd put the original mount kit on here so we could test fit the bags way back when, but now we're ready to get these on for real. So this kit, and I'll put a link in the description below, there's a couple different versions of it, but it's real simple. It's basically a big thumb screw and one of those spring washers. So we just put the spring washers in place of the female side on the bike. And then we've got the mount over here that's gonna take one. So this mount is for the saddlebag. This is gonna get mounted in here, like this. So the spring washer goes on this way. Now, obviously we don't know exactly the orientation of this one yet. We've got to line it up with the bag. So what I like to do is just put it on here loosely. And then once the bag's in place and we've got it connected on this side, you can move this around, insert the big nut or the big thumb screw from the inside. You can reach down here with a wrench and just tighten it in place with the bag on. So with those there, let me grab the bag and we'll put it on. Actually, one more step. Let's get this side cover back on. Now we'll grab the bag and put it on. All right, so I obviously want to get this rear one lined up as perfectly as I can because we're going to base the front one off of it. So that's perfect. Just went right in, no forcing, no nonsense. So get that one snugged down. And then I'm going to come over to the front. You're not going to be able to see this even if I move the camera, but basically I'm just going to move that big bracket around until it lines up with the hole for the big thumb screw. And then I'm going to get it started and tighten down. There we go. Might not have been able to see it, but you could probably hear that click of it going into the right place. All right, so that's pretty good. Now, like I said, I'm just gonna grab a wrench and I'm gonna tighten the bracket down so that it stays in this location. And that's it, bag's on. All right, let's move around to the other side of the bike. It's all ready to go. I'm just gonna show you the bag and what we did to modify that Siren setup. All right, so here is our left side bag. And hopefully you can see sticking out of here, we've got a 12-pin Molex connector. And what that's gonna connect to is obviously the other end of it over here that I've got zip tied in place, similar to what you do if you had like saddlebag speakers or like lid lights or something like that. Just run the wire, zip tie it, and it'll hold it out of the way of your chain and your tire. And that harness goes back into the main harness of the bike. So part of the reason I wanted to source the original amplifier, which I was able to find on eBay, was because these bikes come wired already with an output for the speaker, your controls on the handlebars. So all you gotta do is plug it in and it should all work. And I had some cut wires and some things I had to fix, but for the most part, it was pretty straightforward. The lights were a totally different story and way more of a mess, but the audible stuff actually was pretty simple. So I extended the harness and then I can show you what we did inside the bag, hopefully without dropping it. All right, so this is the giant amplifier that used to be mounted in front of the bag that I now mounted inside. And it's got a big, it's got a screw lock connector on here that had to obviously stay with the amp, but you're never gonna be able to disconnect this and get the bag off, hence the extra connector out here. So added that, that Molex connector and extended the wiring so that we could run it where we needed to. So we go ahead and throw this up here. I just gotta get that harness plugged in. So that click was that harness going into place. And now, just gotta get our bag lined up and we'll get it secured. All right, so bags on. Let me move you around. All right, so that's the look we got going on with the bags and the short fender. I gotta say, I know I was on the fence about whether I was gonna like the short fender with the bags and kind of how that was gonna be, and I know I asked for some input on it. I gotta tell you, I really like it. I know it doesn't look factory, and it would certainly look cleaner, so to speak, if the fender, you know, was a full-length regular FL fender, but I like the way it looks. I like that it looks different. I think it looks mean. I like that you can see the brake rotor back here, the chain, the shocks. I think it's awesome. If you're a Dyna guy like I am, this definitely screams Dyna on a bagger to me. So I really dig it. We'll give you another view when I get the seat put on, and we'll give you the kind of full thing. We'll start it up. We're pretty much done at this point. There's gonna be a couple more installations in this series because I've got a few more things that we've got to do. Some of the bigger stuff will be a whole new phase where we start dealing with fairing, maybe motor work down the road. But we've got some little projects in the interim, like we got to get some foot controls figured out for this and some other little things here and there. So we'll jump back in the middle of other projects we're working on, and we'll come back to this bike. But I got a couple more little things just to bolt on for right now. Oh, and I forgot about the tour pack. We're definitely going to have to get to that at some point. Not in this video, but down the road pretty soon, hopefully. So let me get the rest of the little odds and ends buttoned up here, and we'll show you the finished product. All right, well, here she is, down on the ground and ready for the road. I really can't say enough how much I love how this bike came out. There's so much about it that looks different than the original bike. Obviously, it's still a Road King, but there's really just something different about it. I think some of the things that jump out at me right off the bat are that height in the rear, allowing you to really see the rear wheel, the rotor, obviously the same as the case on the chain side, but the short fenders, the color scheme, all of it. I just really love how it came together. So I'll give you a sense of the height. So we do have a 1-inch longer kickstand on here, like hopefully I mentioned before. The kickstand's also sitting on a 2x6, so it's got some lean to it. We'll have to hopefully do something about that. But just in terms of rideability, I can still obviously get my feet flat on the ground, which was kind of the goal. I mean, obviously, depending on where you sit and not wanting to get your leg touching the pipe, if you don't quite have as long an inseam as I do, you might have a harder time with this. But for me, I have no issue with this height at all. So I'm pretty psyched about that. I really like the position of the bars. I think I would have done, if I could have, with this setup here, the pullback plate from Kraus to get these bars even in a little bit closer. But where they are right here is definitely no problem at all. Everything works really well. So hopefully you can see by the coloring in the pipe, we have run it a little bit. I took it out for a little bit of a ride just to kind of test things out, and I really like how it rides. It's got a very different feel than a traditional Road King would. Definitely feels a lot, you know, tighter, more nimble because of the ergonomic setup we have here, and then also obviously the height and the suspension play into that as well. So definitely psyched about that. So put this back down again. Yeah, I mean, like I said, really dig how it came out. Really have zero complaints about it at all. I think it's super cool. We had an event here at the shop over the weekend. Some people got to see it in person, and the reactions were definitely really positive, so I'm psyched about that too. One other thing was I had mentioned that this was kind of the first phase of this, and we were planning on doing the motor at some point down the road, which we still probably will. I'd also talked about wanting to put an FXRT fairing on it, but everybody, myself included, seems to really like how the just traditional Road King nacelle and lights look up here, so maybe we'll leave that, I don't know. In terms of functionality, the fairing would be nice, but it does look really cool the way it is. So I'll pick up the camera, I'll give you a little bit of a walk around of the bike, we'll kind of point out some of the things that we did along the way, but that's basically it. So I hope you all enjoyed this series and watching this bike come together from where it was, and try and throw a picture up on the screen to remind you of where this bike started versus where it is now. But yeah, I'm psyched about it. So we'll take a little walk around and that'll wrap it up. So thanks again for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.